I am super excited to welcome you all to Supply Side Fresh. Today's presentation is one of the favorites that I ever get a chance to present to an audience of our industry. It's all about your first couple of years in business in the natural products industry, crossing from food, beverage, supplement, and beauty aisles. We're all one conscious business industry together, building the future generations of leaders and entrepreneurs to come. So fortunately, I've been in this industry for almost 3 decades, 27 years to be exact. My name is Schnell, and I'd like to just share with you a little bit about my journey and my background, because it does start actually in the dietary supplement space back in the mid-90s, working for Country Life Vitamins, where I got a tremendous ability and early seat at the table to work in the executive committee of an $80 million company selling vitamins across 20,000 doors across the United States, mainly health food stores back then, and we had about 1,000 SKUs in our portfolio, including both beauty products and tea products. So very early on, I got to see kind of 4 or 5 categories intimately in our industry as an early natural products industry entrepreneur, and then had an opportunity in 2002 when the USDA passed the first organic rules to allow the USDA organic logo to be used on packaging in our industry. I created a brand called Steez, which I co-founded with my partner, Steven Kessler. And for 14 years, we built one of the early stage organic soft drink brands that then branched out into iced teas and energy drinks. We ultimately sold the business to an acquirer in 2015. So that 14-year journey did result in an amazing opportunity at the end to continue the brand on in a bigger portfolio, and also allowed me to really get back to my entrepreneurial roots and work to create and co-found other great brands, some of which you may know today in the market. Runa Tea was a brand I helped start in 2011. We had exited that to Vita Coco. It was an amazing ride, bringing a unique supply chain from Ecuador of tea ingredients to the United States in a different type of energy format than I had used to in the past with Steez. Also got to co-found the very first plant-based seafood company in the United States called Good Catch. In 2016, we partnered with a private equity group. We saw a white space watching what Beyond Meat and Impossible Burger were doing on the meat side, watching plant-based milks, quickly garner 10% of all dairy in terms of volume. And we said, well, why isn't anybody doing that in seafood? So we took a food tech approach. We created a unique model for tuna and whitefish to be recreated using legumes and beans, and launched Good Catch nationwide with Whole Foods as our early partner in 2016. In 2019, I got involved early on in the regen organic space, which right now is a thing. Back in 2017, 18, 19, it was just the concept, and brands were just getting involved in it with very small supply chains. But I co-founded a brand called Good Sam, which is a national brand today in Whole Foods and Sprouts and many industry leading doors and retailers across the country. And Good Sam is a direct trade model, a regen ag model, where we actually buy directly from the farmers. There's no middleman, there's no broker. In some of the most impoverished farming communities across the globe, including Colombia and Africa. Also got to co-found another great plant-based company in the frozen category in 2020 called Cool Beans, and we were the very first gluten-free, plant-based, whole food, whole bean based wrap in the industry, and that's out there in probably 5,000 doors right now. So if you see any of the brands that I've been involved in, there's definitely a theme to all of them. They all have a conscious business value, or we like to call a quintuple bottom line business model that's kind of woven into the fabric, to the DNA, to the why of each brand. And what that means is we have what we call the 5 Ps. And this could be what any founder, you yourself as an entrepreneur or an early stage member of our natural products industry, can adopt for yourself, for your brand, for your outlook in the industry, and for how you show up. And it really is passion, purpose, people, planet, and prosperity. We feel these are guideposts that any business, whether it's your first year or your 5th year or your 10th year, could start to think about, whether it's at the boardroom or early on when you're in your year 1 thinking about how to be the best brand or the best founder or the best representative of your company and your team you could be. These are guideposts to really set you up for success. We feel they're better for the industry, they're better for the planet, and they're better for business. But just to take a step back, if I could just have a 3-minute window, I just want to walk most of the newer entrepreneurs through a small bit of history, because it's important to know if we're a today future leader building your brand, where did this all come from? How did we get here? How did I get here? What came before me? This industry goes back to the 1950s. So many of you may not know, back then, It wasn't so much a CPG related industry. It was organic farming was just getting going. Pennsylvania was a key state in the early days of the natural products industry. It was actually called the natural foods industry back then. Walnut Acres was the first recognized organic farm, and Rodale Institute, which is still around today in Pennsylvania, was the very first media company that was promoting organic values. And they actually had a magazine called Organic Gardening and Home, which I used to get in the 1970s at my house. We had an organic vegetable garden. We used to read the magazine for inspiration and learn how to farm our own food in our backyard at our house in the suburbs of Boston, Massachusetts. So that's where the industry started. But where it went in the 1960s as organic became a thing and Rodale continued to promote and market, very similar to what New Hope and Informa does today, how they promote and market and support our industry at its core. This is back then what Rodale was really doing. And in the 1960s, the very first health food store opened in America. Some of you may think this name comes from LA, but it actually comes from Boston, where I grew up. Erewhon. Erewhon in 1966 was the first natural food store in America, quickly followed a year later in 1967 by Trader Joe's in California. Both chains are still around today, and both chains have launched thousands of brands from food to beverage to supplement and beauty for many, many tens of thousands of consumers that have fallen in love with our industry and have found not only inspiration from shopping in a health food store, but have now become part of our industry in their daily lives. 1970s were a big year, or a big decade, shall I say. The decade was the year of the distributors, but 1970, which was the year I was born, was actually a pivotal year. It's known as the year the natural foods industry began, because that's the year the largest and original nonprofit trade organization was formed, the NNFA, the Nutritional Natural Products Association. It was called Natural Foods back then. Now it's called NPA, but this was the very first trade organization. And today they have 10,000 members and support mainly distributors and manufacturers and brands as well. And so this is in the early days. If you were coming into the industry when I got in back in the 70s, you were part of NNFA and you would go to some of their trade shows. Quickly thereafter, though, the distributors came on board. 1971, Tree of Life was formed, which today is KeHE. And 1970, right around that time, UNFI was formed, founded by Michael Funk, but it was actually called Mountain Peoples back then. It then became UNFI years later through acquisitions. The 1980s were an amazing decade. It was the decade of the retailers. So many of you may know or not know, but Whole Foods was born in 1980 down in Austin, Texas. They were the original kind of pioneer of bringing a chain concept nationwide. You felt safe when you walked into a Whole Foods in the 80s. You felt like you were home if you were someone that wanted natural and organic type products without chemicals and artificial ingredients. 1981, the next year, was the first year Expo West ever had a trade show in California. Only about 300 exhibitors and about 3,000 attendees, but that was the birth of Expo. That was the birth of an actual trade show that could bring all these amazing brands that were starting to be in retail distribution to the one format they could get together a year and all be together in a large kind of format and meet their buyers. Just a couple years later, Wild Oats was founded in 1987. Wild Oats built themselves up to about 300 stores, and they were eventually then acquired by Whole Foods. 1990s were an important decade. That was the decade of the brands. So many of the biggest brands that we would say are the pioneers of our industry, from Horizon, Stonyfield yogurt, Silk soy milk was created back then. The 90s were all about innovation and founders that really had passion, like probably many of you on this call today or watching this video today, had the passion and inspiration to come into the industry and found the first brands. And the reason why it was easier in the 90s to ever do it since before then is because there was actual retailers that were looking and very hungry, like Whole Foods and Wild Oats and others, and Erewhon and Trader Joe's, for products. So 90s where some of the biggest brands were born, and some of the best founders that were even mentors to me I got to meet came out of. I came in the industry in the 2000s, so 2002 is when I founded the Steez brand, and that decade is really known as the decade of the certification. So in the 2000s, you started in 2002 with the organic certification, certified organic, which thank God is still a thing today. Back then, not everyone necessarily believed in it, but thank God it worked out for all of us that were early pioneers in organic. But then you had the non-GMO project come to market, and fair trade, three of many. There was others as well, but those are three of the biggest certifications that came out of that decade. There was also organizations such as Carbon Neutral, which could actually certify your business to be a carbon neutral business with offsets, and many other amazing groups came around to certify your brand, to basically make sure these brands could be the best they could be, or at least on their packaging, show the consumer they were the very best brand they could be in their category. 2010s, which is just last decade we're coming out of, was all about two main trends. Early in the 2010s was all about plant-based. And in the beginning, there was a lot of what you would call plant-based fast food type products coming, which would be more extruded products and products that were processed. Later on in the decade, as we closed out 2010, we definitely saw whole food plant-based products and brands using whole foods, not processed grains and vegetables, becoming more, I think, where the shift was going. So that's all still playing out today. And one of the most important things to come out of last decade was the regenerative movement. So 2016, Rodale Institute, we talked about them back in the 50s, still around, changing the world, doing things for the better and inspiring the next generation. They kicked off the Regen Organic movement at their farm and at their facility in Pennsylvania. I got to be there personally and was so inspired by seeing the difference between a conventional acre, an organic acre, and a Regen Organic acre. That's what got me to want to be involved a couple of years later and create and help found one of the first snack food Regen Organic brands, which is the Good Sam brand I mentioned. So let's get into the quintuple bottom line. Let's talk a bit about if you're in your first couple of years as an entrepreneur, as a founder, maybe on the C team, even if you're a manager that's looking to make a difference and be a leader in your company. These are business values that you could use, and you can use some of them, you can use all of them, but the magic about these 5 Ps is they're how you identify them yourself and through your brand and how you feel most passionate about explaining it. So we at the Naturally Network, which I'm on the national board of, are the largest nonprofit organization in our industry. We have 6,000 members, we have 10 chapters, we have 200 working board members. We are really going to get behind this 5 Ps concept throughout the natural products industry because we believe it aligns with the undeniable consumer shift right now towards corporate social responsibility. So most of you have probably heard about CSR initiatives. Corporate social responsibility isn't a new thing. We're just helping really use these guideposts as inspiration for you as founders and you as leaders to look at your business to be the very best you could be. So let's talk about some examples of the 5 Ps and examples of how this quintuple bottom line business model could work in your brand. They're a definition of business success. They can help define, whether it's your vision statement, it's your mission statement, it's your goals, it's your why, by really sitting there and thinking about how these 5 attributes of your business can help you. You will see that they can offer a framework for opportunity, for optimization, for innovation and improvement across all of your business departments. And the model we're going to walk through soon is going to also show some examples towards the end of my presentation, so you can see some of the examples of businesses that are doing this today in our industry, and I hope that will be inspirational. So when we talk about passion, purpose, people, planet, and prosperity, these are value systems that we care about. We care in particular because you as future leaders in our industry, we want to set you up for as much success as possible. And we feel this is definitely one of the best ways that you can adopt for that success and prepare for that success. It does help form, as I mentioned, your mission, vision, and core values. Core values is a real big one. It's like, what does your brand really stand for today? What is the why while you're doing it? Now, so many entrepreneurs like me are just purely passionate, and I wanted to bring maybe a family recipe to market, or maybe you wanted to bring something to the market that healed you or helped you, but really identifying your why, especially as you build your company into a much larger organization with key stakeholders, with investors, with employees. Having that buy-in from everybody is really important, from going from $1 million in revenue to $100 million in revenue, and setting your company up for the most success it could be as a large organization in the natural products industry that could do the maximum amount of good in the world. It's also a go-to model for key decision making, and that means hiring and firing. When you look at some of the ways that we could care about people and do it maybe in a more conscious way, as an example, and we could talk about that, in some of the pages coming up, you'll see some examples. And it's also, I think, a great way to network and to build your reputation when you're talking from that place of passion and purpose and caring about people, and ultimately the prosperity of your business. And that prosperity of your business does not just mean your bottom line or what you're giving back to your shareholders. That's profit. The prosperity is really thinking about how much good in the world could your business do if it was as successful as it possibly could be. Think about a world, and I used to think about this when I was a young entrepreneur and I started Steez, because of course I'm in the beverage industry. I probably shook some feathers up at Coke and Pepsi by launching an organic soda line. But, I thought to myself back then, imagine if I inspired the boards of, say, Coca-Cola one year, that they saw me, a little soda brand, being successful, standing by my organic values. What if that board woke up one day and said,